By the end of today's episode, you'll know how much emotional prep is enough without overthinking, overdoing, or overcomplicating your scenes. Welcome to the Actor's Career Compass, where we help aspiring screen actors find high-quality auditions, sign with great agents, and book major roles in legit productions. I'm your host, Martin Benson, and today I'll be covering the danger of doing too much prep for auditions and how to know when to stop, a simple rule to keep your emotional shifts clean and strong, and how to avoid that trying too hard type of feeling that you might get in your performances. So, how much preparation is too much? Well, first off, let's talk about over-prepping and what it actually is. It basically shows up as like overthinking your choices instead of trusting your instincts, or layering like too many emotions at once. And that can kind of look a little bit weird, like you're trying to be sad and also confused and angry at the same time. And it can start to look kind of like muddy on camera, and it oftentimes leads to overacting or indication. Another thing that it could look like is sort of like forcing moments instead of just kind of letting them happen naturally. So what you need to remember is that, first off, you're not performing the emotion, okay? It's not about trying to show sadness. It's more just about responding naturally to whatever is happening in the scene, right? So what you want to do is you want to prep just enough to know why your character is saying each and every line in the scene, okay? And what I mean by that is the why behind the line is way more important than the how you should say it, okay? So don't think about how am I going to say the line. Think about why. Why am I actually saying this? I recommend that you try something that I call the 2 emotional shifts max rule, okay? So not very creative naming, but the 2 emotional shifts max, that rule basically means that you want to pick 1 or at most 2 emotional changes in the scene, and that's it. That's going to allow you to keep your performance very simple and very strong and straightforward and easy for people to follow. Okay, so for example, maybe in the scene you start off being like frustrated, but then at a certain point in the scene, that frustration shifts into hopefulness. Okay, obviously you want to figure out why. Why does that happen? Why there? Because if you're not clear on that, then it's just going to kind of be difficult to watch. People will be like, wait, what happened? Like, what am I seeing? Even though you figure out the why that shift happens, the audience doesn't need to know why. You just have to be clear on why. And then whatever happens in your performance, it'll happen naturally and people just believe it. They might not know why you're changing or what's going on, but they see it and it feels a lot more real than if you just suddenly go like, okay, here I'm frustrated and now I'm hopeful. But like there's this, like what's happening, right? That's why is so much more important than how. Now, as I said earlier, you also want to avoid playing multiple emotions at the same time, okay? So 1 emotion per moment is a lot easier to play, and it's also not going to confuse the audience. There are some times where you can play more than 1 emotion, but I still don't recommend that people do it unless they're really, really strong at performing and have had a lot of experience doing that, right? Whether in classes or working with a coach, someone who can actually give you feedback and make sure that it does look real and you really are holding on to those 2 emotions at the same time. Otherwise, it's way easier to just kind of pick one and then a shift point and then go to a different thing, right? So doing those 2 things where you avoid playing multiple emotions at once and you just basically choose 1 moment of where that shift will happen is going to make your acting a lot cleaner, easier to follow, and feel more honest and watchable. Remember that you're not doing auditions to try to show your range and to show that you can play all kinds of different things and layers and everything. You're doing it to just let the casting director see what do you look like and sound like on camera, and do they realistically see you playing that role? Most of the time in real life, especially in the types of roles that you're likely to be auditioning for. If you're at the co-star or guest star level, they're not going to be extremely complicated, deep emotions. They're usually going to be something a bit more straightforward, because remember, if you're not the main character in the show, like the episode or the film, you shouldn't be the one that the scene is about. So you shouldn't be having all kinds of deep emotions that the audience is trying to follow, because they're not really paying as much attention to you, right? So that's why I recommend that you keep things very simple. You're doing an audition, again, not to show your range, but to let the casting director see how real your acting can be and get a sense of that they are actually feeling something while they watch. That's not very complicated, but that's really easy to follow, if that makes sense. Okay. So there's 3 questions that I want you to answer before you record any audition or monologue or any sort of self-tape. Okay. So try doing this instead of over preparing for a scene. Number 1, you want to ask, what does my character in this scene want overall, right? So what is their primary objective in the scene? What are they trying to achieve? That's the first question. Second question, why are they saying each and every line, knowing what the overall goal is, right? So if my character's main goal in the scene, let's say, is to find out information from someone, right? Like, I need to know the answer to whether this person did it or not, right? Maybe during the scene, there's some questions where they're like, well, did you do this? Well, obviously that's in alignment with what the goal is. But then maybe there's a moment where the character says, well, I don't know how to respond to that, right? And it's because the other character didn't tell them the truth or something. And so now their line is, well, I don't know how to respond to that. Well, that's obviously not helping. Saying that isn't necessarily helping them get closer to their objective of finding out information. So why would they say that line? Okay. Why did they say, well, I don't know how to respond to that? Well, maybe in that moment, they're kind of thrown off and they're just like quickly reacting to something that the character says. Okay, fine. So that's how it's going to be played. Now that you know that, when you actually go and do the performance, that you know what the meaning is and why you're saying that line, so it becomes easier. If you didn't make that decision, then it might just not come off naturally the way that you say that line, okay? So the idea is that if something isn't clear, you just have to make up an answer, okay? So again, why are they saying each and every line in the scene? If it's different than what their objective is, then come up with an answer there. And if something isn't clear and it's not answered in the breakdown for the character, just think, be creative, and make something up, okay? The last question of the 3 that you should be asking yourself is there any specific moment of change in emotion? And if so, why should it, like, where is it and why should it be there, okay? So those are the 3 primary questions. Again, what does my character want overall in the scene? Why are they saying each and every line, particularly the lines that don't seem lined up with that goal? And then finally, are there any points in the scene where a strong emotional shift would make sense? And if so, why? Those 3 questions are really all you need to do to prepare. And if you do that, it's going to make everything in the scene way clearer, and the scene will be a lot easier for someone to watch and understand what's happening. Too much prep by really like thinking about like, okay, here, I'm going to lift my hand up and I'm going to turn to the side and, you know, like all kinds of stuff like that. It's going to kill the spontaneity of the scene and kind of get rid of what should be something that basically comes out in any type of film or natural acting performance, which is your instinct, right? You want to stop before you get in your head or make the scene too confusing for viewers, or before you just like throw yourself off. Like if you're trying to memorize 50 different moments, like beats and things that are happening, you're just going to get so confused and like start forgetting the lines, right? So just keep it really simple. Stick again to 1 or 2 emotional shifts max. Make sure that they're clear and you understand them, and then just know why each line is being said. And with that, you should be good to go. Thanks for listening. Now, if you want to dive even deeper on acting technique, I actually recommend checking out a podcast I did called 4 Ways That Actors Struggle with Self-Tape Prep and How to Fix Them. That's episode number 128. I go into depth about self-tape setup, finding readers, and how to analyze your audition before you go ahead and submit. Okay, again, it's episode number 128. It's called 4 Ways That Actors Struggle with Self-Tape Prep and How to Fix Them. And it's on the Actors Career Compass. If you found the podcast helpful, I would really appreciate if you could leave a review, as it does help a lot more actors to find the podcast as well. So you can just go to ratethispodcast.com/actor success. Lastly, if you are interested in working with me one-on-one, I would absolutely love the opportunity to meet you. You can learn more about how my coaching program works on my website, martinbenson.com. That's MartinBenTsen. I'd love to speak with you, and we'll see if you'd be a good fit for the coaching program. Thanks so much, and I'll see you soon.